Now it's tempting, I even hear as I'm speaking, it's tempting to immediately want to look at the delusions that may be going on here and the dangers, and I do, and we're going to in my talk a little bit as well. But you know, there are risks and deceptions involved in pretty much all social relationship. You have to kind of remember that. So I suggest that we look at the whole and think of our face-to-face and socio-mental connections layered in and around one another, constituting a kind of portfolio of connections, each which has its own special characteristics, benefits, and drawbacks, and all of them which need to be uncovered and understood and studied from the connector's point of view, as well as its effects in our society. I mean, if these connections are real to people, they will be real in their consequences. That's a famous sociological theorem by a guy named W.I. Thomas. And a lot of other sociologists have looked at this too, at the way that a social reality gets created by people acting as if something were real. There are games and spaces online in which people truly create a small world together, and the intimacies they claim there can be startling. One person said to me, it could even be argued that we are communicating on a deeper level than we would be if we were face to face. Now, the delusional aspect of it, I mean, this doesn't mean when we do this that we can't tell the difference between reality and fantasy. I think it means that as technology-savvy people, we blur and play with the concept of reality rather more freely now. I mean, we can be intrigued with socio-mental relationships and give them meaning, generally without losing touch with everyday reality or with confusing them with face-to-face relationships. We've become such experts at this that we can even see fictional characters as simultaneously real and constructed. Mentally approaching them as if they were real heightens the pleasure of that experience, and it also gives us practice in making these socio-mental relationships. It doesn't mean there aren't dangers or that people can't become deluded or use poor judgment in making them. Of course they can, and they do. All relationships of some substance and depth are loaded with their own particular kinds of risks and rewards. And when we interact without FaceTime, there are new dynamics to the relationships that are formed. For example, the sense of anonymity and distance that is created on the internet. It can result in people acting more freely, perhaps more recklessly than they otherwise might. And certain important and wonderful things are missing when sensory cues and visual cues that you get from face-to-face are limited or absent. And then again, other things might be heightened. Some aspects of connecting may be enhanced. Anonymity, the lack of being able to see someone, has been found to often result in lowered inhibitions by people who may then behave more freely and open themselves up to intimacy more than in a face-to-face encounter. After all, if you think about it, even when we're face-to-face, people sometimes prefer to be in a private setting, even a dark setting, in order to give rein to their most intimate exchanges, their most intense affections. Well, socio-mental bonding can kind of permit people to hide that way, visually from others, and therefore it can develop other types of intimacy, even if it's going to prevent the face-to-face one. And it could even be argued we're communicating on a deeper level than we would be if we were face-to-face. Many people told me that as well. Things like, I got to know my online friends' insides instead of their outsides, and I feel their insides are more important. Now, younger people, and I always feel so old when I'm saying this, and I find myself saying it more and more, but younger people are using mobile technologies so easily and flexibly, cell phones, little portable devices, so constantly and easily that I think much of what I'm saying here is soon going to be public, second nature, very obvious, kind of unremarkable. I mean, the younger generation, as we're studying them, tell us that the friends with whom that they text message or talk on the phone or IM or meet in a chat room or hang out with at school, that they're all kind of equivalently referred to as friends. They simply think of friendship as easily mediated by technology or not necessarily mediated by technology. And they use these technologies as they see fit to conduct their relationships, often without causing concern to them or even causing comment. And that's just one potential consequence of all this that I want to mention. I'm going to touch on just 2 or 3 others, but of course there's potentially dozens. It's unlimited how all of this might be affecting our society. But I want to start just by talking a moment about something called communication ubiquity. And the idea that communication, it's safe to say for most of us, is ubiquitous. It is everywhere. It's in the air all around us. And this has led to a sense of permanent availability to one another, which many people experience as a drastic decrease in time and space that's private, a sense that one is never alone, never off work, always on call. Now, like most social consequences of technology use, this is neither necessarily good nor bad. There's a definite pleasure associated with having immediate and constant contact with a world of others. It can help us feel that, there are people like us, like I said, people understand us, help us feel less alone. And it can provide us with an almost continuous source of companionship. You can go online almost any time of the day or night and find someone who's interested in something you are interested in. The internet specializes in this. So you can remain almost constantly plugged in a certain way to these others who surround us in the world. One person told me, I always have all these people in my life, so I never feel lonely. And if you think about it, this can be highly effective for us, even indispensable to the homebound or disabled, or perhaps just the terminally shy. It's also convenient to be able to coordinate activities at any time, including the technological redirection of activities that have already started. Now, this can be a convenience, and it can be an inconvenience as well, because we can now change plans at a moment's notice, or plans can be changed on us at a moment's notice. The ability to reach others more quickly in an emergency is often touted as a real benefit of these technologies. But then the flip side of that is, are we now recasting almost every event as an emergency? We can keep in better contact with children, spouses, or coworkers, or is that contact sometimes manifest as unfairly checking up on them continuously, maybe depriving them of needed privacy and the space to be themselves, at least for a little while? We have a world of entertainment at our disposal, but we've got eyes looking over our shoulder while we engage in it. We have an unlimited supply of things to do, but are we becoming unable to handle stillness? People tell us they feel more safe and more secure with cell phones and wireless computing at their constant disposal, but they feel more lost than ever when the batteries go dead or when they're in an area without a signal or a service. So if you get an idea of the benefits and drawbacks to each one of these technologies. And there's also special problems and limitations associated with sociomental connections. The computer age is creating a new echelon of elites, which are based upon technological sophistication. And that, of course, correlates with money, status, and power. Now, technological have-nots cannot really participate in the communities I'm talking about here to the same extent as those who have access. And they can't fairly compete in a marketplace on which skills like this are predicated. They can't even easily take an online class or access research or information via a mobile technology. So their ability to gain all the things I'm talking about here is diminished. It becomes more and more difficult all the time for people without the technology and the skills to become fully integrated into our society. So the exploitation of the powerless is a real and related concern here. Face-to-face accountability provides a check on exploitation, pedophilia, internet pornography and its availability to children, identity theft, spam, spyware, viruses, the list of problems that come with these kinds of technologies. And the fact that there is exploitation associated with many of these problems has to concern us as those of us who are studying society. And as troubling as all these trends are, and I told you I'd look at both sides of this, it's perhaps most troubling that many individuals remain unaware of them. They often believe there's little danger to be found or few social risks to be found in using these technologies because people say that it makes them feel safe and that in the emotional, often intimate moments of connecting that I talked about earlier, people forget about the risks. They forget about the dangers. They're just swept up in what that one woman called the rush of connecting. Finally, I'm going to mention just one more aspect of this and then wrap up. When we use these technologies, we gain control over the display and exchange of highly personal aspects of ourselves. And so now we can manipulate, disguise, and even play with identity online. And this, I think, is fascinating. It's an area in which a lot of people in psychology and sociology are doing a lot of work. Even in an everyday sense, say you don't go online to manipulate your gender or your race or something major about you. Even in an everyday sense, just the luxury of being able to use these technologies can be employed to sort of edit ourselves, to fix up ourselves. One person told me that when she emails, she often edits it 3-4 times so it sounds exactly the way she wants. Incidentally, women do that more than men. Men tend to fire off faster, shorter emails. Women tend to labor over their emails much longer. And it's an identity issue. You know, you could look at it as manipulation, or you could look at it as a chance to use this technology in a way which you think might present yourself more authentically. So again, there's sort of two sides of this. It's the anonymity of being on the internet and to some extent other mobile technologies that allows some people to feel that they're taking control of uncomfortable or difficult face-to-face situations, maybe to alter aspects of themselves or explore various aspects of themselves, but in some cases in a very positive way, in a way that they had been wanting to do. They feel this frees them to be more themselves or to display a side of themselves they'd like to explore but don't feel safe doing in the face-to-face world. So in closing, people in online and mobile communities, they generally seem willing to trade certain in-person pleasures and difficulties for this increased freedom, this increased sense of control over their environments. And of course, there are pleasures and dangers and just the everyday sorts of consequences that accompany any interpersonal association. Anytime you engage in social interaction, you run the risk of being hurt or disappointed. You can never control their content. You might be able to control something of their structure. And it's certainly possible that as individuals and as a society, we may become increasingly less tolerant of the ordinary, imperfect, unpredictable, uncontrollable face-to-face interaction. But you see, new social implications of all of this are emerging all the time, and that's why I think sociologists are so badly needed in an ever-changing world. We need to uncover and examine these changes, and there will be lots of work for people like me, and hopefully maybe some of you too, keeping us busy for quite some time to come studying all this. Okay, that's what I have. What do you think of all of this? Questions? Comments? Anything?